I'm Eric Inch. I don't know if I know many of you guys. I do recommend or do see a couple familiar faces, but I'm a modern workplace specialist, and my old boss, Mark, I recommend. But I'm a modern workplace specialist at Microsoft, so cover all of our teamwork, collaboration, security solutions, as well as Windows from a technical pre-sale standpoint. Today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft security. Starting off, why Microsoft? So in the past, Microsoft wasn't typically thought of as a security company. Okay, quick show of hands, how many people consider Microsoft a true security company? Okay. So we're going to talk through why that has been changing some of our investment in security and why you should consider Microsoft in that area. We're then going to go through some common case studies. It's going to be really around 3 of the really most common cybersecurity incidents that you probably worry about and a lot of people run into. And we'll see out there some real examples of companies that actually have faced that. And then just going to finish off with some top priorities and recommendations. So how to get started, like a 30, 90 long-term roadmap on where to go from security. The first off is really our biggest differentiator out there in the market is the intelligent security graph. So if you've heard of that, and just the amount of signal we're able to see across the globe, 630 billion monthly authentications, almost 500 billion monthly emails, over 1 billion Azure accounts. Some lesser known is stuff like botnet data from the Digital Crimes Unit. So we'll work with governments around the world. They'll call Microsoft in to do the forensics whenever there's a breach. We're able to take that data, put it into our security graph, and use it across all of our security products. With working with researchers, law enforcement. Also, another big one is the global cloud consumer commercial services. So as you can imagine, our Xbox services, one of the most attempted hacked applications out there in the globe. So we're able to see these advanced attacks, how they're happening, update and say, hey, we've never seen them move this way or try to exploit that vulnerability, update our security graph, use it across the entire stack of security products. And what that allows us to do is really get advanced detections for the cybersecurity attacks. So we're able to leverage local big data machine learning models, take those trillions of signals and map out, hey, maybe we've never seen this before, but we're going to go ahead and block that based on the amount of data and signal we've seen out there and share it across the environment. As you'll see with some of the integration across the platform, blocking stuff at email, kicking off investigations on endpoints. So we have that full end-to-end solution. As well as we have across the 4 pillars. So identity and access, a lot of threat protection solutions that you probably leverage today. Information protection that I see probably a lot of customers not leveraging as much around the DLP, data classification, data level encryption, and then some of the security management capabilities. The first scenario we're going to talk through is around the IP theft on employee exit. So that scenario where you have an employee leave the organization, maybe before that they downloaded just hundreds of gigs of data, terabytes of data, whatever, from HR, finance, sensitive information from the company, creating a back door within the environment. So even after they're gone, they still have remote access into the environment. Large uploads and also creating file synchronization. So even after they're gone, if data is saved in specific locations, you can synchronize that out to a remote server and continually that attack from that IP theft. So the keys here are really having that deep visibility into what's abnormal within the environment. So having that detection to say, hey, I'm going to discover really early on where my employees are going. So I can see, hey, we use OneDrive, we use SharePoint Online, but this group of users or this user is now going to a Google Drive personal account, and we see just hundreds of gigs of data being uploaded to that Google account. It'll also do anomaly detection. So we can say, hey, Jack typically logs in from these machines, accesses these SharePoint sites. Now Jack's logged on from 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday, accessing sites he doesn't access. We can go ahead and give you that really early detection to say, hey, this is an anomaly, and this is not how Jack typically works. Go ahead and give you that really early detection. As well as the ability to go ahead and provide some protections around that data that potentially before it goes out the door. So you can see here in this example, Stella, this is gonna go ahead and identify. You can see the investigation priority score. So she's got a high risk score based on stuff she's been doing, her account's been doing recently. So some of her activities changed. She has 7 risky activities, 8 open alerts. And where a lot of that's coming from is here. You can see all of the alerts. A login to a Windows device that she doesn't typically log into, a suspicious VPN connection from a location maybe she never logs into. On-prem detections, as you can see, lateral movement path. So if you guys are familiar with like the cybersecurity kill chain, one of the early things after getting access to an environment is to move around the environment, try to compromise more machines, access more data. You can go ahead and see that detection really early on in this, as well as across cloud as well. So in the case study we had, it was a mass download and then a mass upload to some third-party external site. We can go ahead and see Stella's logged into SharePoint and did that mass download of data from the SharePoint Online environment. You can go ahead and alert the security team, alert the IT team. You can also take automatic action and block that download from continuing if it hits that threshold within your policy. But also, it's really important to go ahead and have that data classified in the first place. So with like Azure Information Protection and a lot of the DLP solutions out there, you can classify that data. Hey, this is highly sensitive. This would cause business harm if it were to get into the wrong hands. I'm going to classify that data, but I'm also going to put protection and encryption around that. So I'm going to require somebody to have to authenticate. So even if it does leave the environment in that a large upload, whoever accesses that data is going to have to authenticate to access that data. Otherwise, it'll just be encrypted. It can be automatically classified based on the content within that data. So maybe it has social security numbers, credit card numbers. You can automatically classify that. Maybe it's an account number or something specific to your organization. You can create that own screen and automatically classify it based on that. Or you can go ahead and leverage if the data is stored in OneDrive or SharePoint or Teams or Box or Dropbox or some of the other third parties. You can go ahead and scan across that cloud storage, look for that sensitive content, automatically classify and protect it where it sits. Or you can intercept it if it's trying to be downloaded to a non-domain joined or non-managed machine and automatically provide that protection as well. In the scenario where the attackers probably are always going to try to keep some sort of backdoor in place, probably multiple backdoors. So if security finds the one, remediates and removes it, you don't close their access to the environment. With some of the native capabilities within Windows 10, like Credential Guard, I don't know, who's familiar with Credential Guard here? Just chat, all right. So a lot of the anti-malware stuff. So the Microsoft anti-malware is multi-tiered. A lot of people think it's like signature-based. It's not. It has signature detection, but it's multi-layered all the way up to detonation. We'll send a copy of that file up, detonate, and observe behavior before we actually allow access. So you can be assured that, hey, this is just not going to be 0 days getting through. We're going to observe behavior and make sure it doesn't do anything malicious. A lot of the exploit guard capabilities. And then Credential Guard is a really powerful Windows 10 capability that will allow you to secure against one of the most common attacks for moving around a network. So if you guys have heard of like pass the ticket, pass the hash, it's a really common way for somebody to steal a Kerberos ticket or a password from a machine, log into the next machine, and never need to know the user's password. Even if the user had a 50-character password, it doesn't matter because you got the password hash already. That can provide that protection. But then also having the ability to do visibility into the advanced attacks. So there's a stat like 63% of actual endpoint breaches didn't use malware at all. So these attackers are evading what they know the majority of customers have is antivirus on that machine to look for well-known viruses. This is going ahead, writing right into memory and evading those malware. So nothing's ever hitting disk, and it can go ahead and evade with those advanced attacks. So having the ability to go ahead and identify those advanced methods. You can see here, this machine is currently a high risk, a logged on user, Peter Gibbons, but it also will do it like a security assessment across the environment. So look for known vulnerabilities on there. So continuous vulnerability scan to say, hey, we've identified stuff like maybe an old version of Java or an Adobe version has a vulnerability. We can alert you really proactively to say, hey, you're going to want to take care of this as part of your endpoint security, as well as having all of the alerts throughout the detection. And then have advanced visibility into that. So data classification, It's not the easiest thing to identify what your data classification scheme should be, where your sensitive data lives, what it should be classified as, protected, who's the permissions around that. But having that visibility to see where that sensitive data is being accessed, who's it being accessed by, as well as then being able to take decisions like revoking access after it's left the environment. So in that scenario, the case study, hundreds or terabytes of data left the environment. You could see, hey, now this is being accessed from China. I don't have any users in China. I'm going to revoke access. And then all of that data is just not even accessible anymore. So even though it's outside the environment, you still have control over that, who accesses that data. And then you can see here, like Bill Lumberg, Peter Gibbons on their machines, what types of sensitive data they have. So if you see a machine that maybe is of high risk, you can then drill in to say, hey, this is a high risk machine. Maybe somebody compromised that. I want to see what sensitive data is actually on there so I can go ahead and revoke and remove that access from there. From the second scenario, so or just to cap off the IP theft one, it's important to classify and protect your data. In a lot of these scenarios, even if that data were to leave undetected, making sure it's encrypted and requires authentication, you have the ability to revoke it, it's important. You can sleep a lot easier if it does happen. But really having the additional visibility into that data exfiltration, the anomalies into the environment. I talk to the majority of my customers, and one thing they know is there's shadow IT in the organization. The next thing is they don't know what it is. They know their users are using personal cloud storage, personal external sites, probably a lot of personal email, and they just don't know how widespread that is. So having the additional visibility to see, hey, we allow Gmail, but we're going to have then controls around what you can actually go ahead and from a corporate data standpoint put out there. Some have the advanced protection. So as I mentioned, the majority of endpoint breaches don't leverage known antivirus. You have to go above and beyond nowadays. It's quite easy for an attacker to evade just an anti-malware solution on the endpoint. And really important, and probably not stressed enough, monitor and respond to the security alerts. So be really diligent and proactive, staying in the alerts. Don't wait until a user says, hey, something odd's going on within my environment. I have a customer that had a security breach, and they were in the environment for 2 years. And the way they identified it is the IT admin logged into a server that somebody overseas was already logged into. And they're like, hey, this is odd. I don't know why anybody's doing that. They had forensics come out, do it 2 years ago. Somebody bought some fake thing online. It didn't come. So then they sent like, hey, go ahead and open this attachment and we'll go ahead and this is your receipt or we'll get your refund started. Open a back door into the environment. And for 2 years, it was just undetected. So really, really important to go ahead and monitor maybe some of those security authentication logs. If you guys have a SIM correlating a lot of those events, or a lot of these advanced tools will help automatically show you those anomalies within the environment. Also, irresponsible third party. I'm sure everybody's heard of the Target breach and the big issue they had. It was leveraging a third party vendor account that wasn't monitored, and that's how the attacker came in. It's been a phishing attack, which if I saw hands here, everybody's probably seen a fair amount of phishing attacks come through the email. Sent them a phishing, stole their credentials, logged in, went undetected, was able to create a persistence with an account creation, created a different account that wasn't known, did some advanced memory scraping, and then used common utilities like PsExec from sysinternals to go ahead and do some of that data exfiltration and steal just however many hundreds of thousands or millions of credit cards that ended up being. I think, around $300 million in total loss to Target. So just the numbers can be really, really damaging from a security standpoint. Some capabilities. So one of the biggest things, and it was like 91% of known breaches over the past couple of years started from email phishing attack. Reasons for that is it's easy to do and it's very simple. Regardless of how much security training you have a handful of people that are going to click on anything they get in their email, without question. So they're able to evade the anti-malware. So with a lot of the advanced solutions out there, we can actually scan it for malware, open up a copy of it, detonate it, and observe behavior before passing it on. So those attacks that are completely 0-day, maybe you're the target they're going after, you can go ahead and still say, hey, we haven't seen this before, but if you open this, it's going to do X, Y, Z, and XYZ are bad. So we're going to go ahead and block that email from that advanced attack. More common though, I see the malicious email link. So not even trying to use a malicious attachment, sending users out to a link that goes to a site that probably looks exactly like your Office 365 login screen to go ahead and provide your credentials to verify before end of day or your account's going to be disabled type thing. Once they have that, then they have your account, they can log in, and we'll talk about some of those other protections around that as well as some of the anti-spoof, anti-phish. So here you can see within the Security and Compliance Center, real quick, how many people are currently on Office 365 today? Okay, so most, yep. So you can see the top threats facing your organization, who the top targeted users are, likely a lot of your executive team, your management team that they're probably going after, your finance team. You can also see how it's trended over a period of time. Quite common for an attacker not to just send a bulk phishing campaign day one. They'll send a little bit here, a little bit there, tweak depending on how successful, and then cast that wider net. So you can actually see beforehand, hey, we want to be aware that this is probably coming within the organization. You can also, with some of the advanced detection and integration across the platform, see stuff like an automated investigation. So in this scenario, weaponized URL came in, it was maybe able to evade the initial detection. It'll go ahead, reach out, investigate all emails across the organization. So the investigation kicked off. We see this mailbox is doing, or 6 mailboxes are doing intra-org phish. So the attacker got in, the first thing he tried to do is say, hey, I'm going to attack my internal employees, try to get more credentials, try to get more compromise. But I'm also going to go ahead and investigate the user standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and see, I got suspicious logins to Jeff V's account, and he did a mass download. So integrating it with some of the cloud monitoring and security solutions, we can see weaponized URL came in. They did some internal work to go ahead and spread on the network, but they also logged in remotely and downloaded a bunch of data that Jeff had access to. I'm also going to kick off an investigation on the machine. So since I have visibility into email, identity, and endpoint, I can kick off an investigation. We're going to see, hey, this user's compromised, anomalies detected, the device is compromised as well with malware. I'm automatically going to take remediation, block that URL, delete all emails, require the user to password reset, and then require multi-factor authentication on that account. So in that scenario, the user logged in once, had access from some remote location because we can see from suspicious login. Going forward, it's going to have to require multi-factor authentication where then Jeff V is getting that phone ping, or they has to enter that 6-digit code to say, hey, somebody's trying to authenticate from somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Germany or whatever, wherever that's identified. And one of the biggest and easiest areas, and I just saw a stat that our product group put out, was like 10% of our enterprise customers are leveraging multi-factor authentication today. And that's mind-blowing because so many attacks actually leverage just stolen or weak passwords. And of what we've identified, 99.9% of those attacks would have been blocked if multi-factor authentication were in place. So a lot of people leverage is, hey, we're going to go longer passwords or make them change passwords every 30 days, 60 days, or whatever. That's not going to protect a lot of these advanced attacks where multi-factor, not going to block them all, but a lot of these ones that are going to be taken advantage of could be blocked with multi-factor. Included within a lot of the Office 365 Microsoft suites, is everybody using multi-factor today or looking at it at least? Okay. One thing to leverage with that is what we call conditional access. So it really allows you to get granular in how you provide that secure authentication. So you can get specific devices. As an example, you can say, hey, these 10 applications can only be accessed from a domain joined to managed machine. So you can assure, hey, those are the ones I have my antivirus, my group policies, my monitoring on. If not, maybe I'm going to require multi-factor. You can also go down to physical location. So say, hey, maybe if it's a domain joined machine from one of my corporate locations, I trust that enough. They're able to compromise the machine and get on the network, get an IP address. I'm not going to require multi-factor every time they access that. However, maybe you want to allow OWA access for remote access to OWA from non-domain joined machines. Pretty common scenario. You can still allow that, but then maybe you require MFA in that scenario. So you can go ahead and still allow those other scenarios, but have the ultimate or the best case security on that. You can also, with SharePoint and OneDrive, you can provide limited access. So you can evaluate where they're connecting from, what device, maybe allow access after multi-factor. But then I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, you're from a non-domain joined machine. You can access SharePoint, but it's going to be read-only. So there won't be ability to sync the document library. There won't be the ability to download the document from SharePoint or OneDrive. So you can still allow them to read-only access from their cousin's machine, their grandma's machine, their best friend's machine. But they can't go ahead and say, I want to sync all of my corporate documents down to that machine. So that's a capability part of Azure AD Conditional Access. You can see here, Peter, in this scenario, was trying to get to a site that required domain joined access. It blocked him because he was not on a domain joined machine. We also have the ability to tie in some risk-based authentication to say, hey, we're going to go ahead, and if you're doing something identified as one of our risk levels, for example, if it's a high risk and we've identified out in the dark web that your credentials have been compromised, we can go ahead and say, hey, obviously any authentication after that, I think we'd all agree is high risk because everybody could have access to your password. Maybe you're logging in an impossible travel scenario where you log in from Detroit, Michigan, and then an hour later you try to log in from Germany. Nobody travels that fast, so it's going to be a higher risk authentication. Maybe it requires multi-factor, maybe it just blocks it completely and requires you try again later. With some of the advanced visibility, so you can see the malicious credential theft tool, nothing running actually on the machine, but you can see with the advanced capabilities, the actual commands that were run into memory on that machine. So you can get really, really granular for a lot of those advanced attacks that aren't just trying to trick you with some well-known script or malware, and go ahead and get that really early detection for your security team to go ahead and then further investigate what's going on in that endpoint. You can see here, you can also tie that in with conditional access to say, hey, maybe from a corporate network location on a domain joined machine, that's usually trust enough. However, we see a lot of malicious stuff going on the machine. We're going to block access even in that scenario until that machine can be remediated. Just a couple key takeaways here. Advanced email, something you guys should definitely look into. Anti-spam, anti-malware, still definitely needed. But a lot of attackers, it doesn't take them much time to realize what could get through those email security. Have something that can do some detonation, observed behavior. Ensure strong authentication for all accounts. As I mentioned at the end, I'm going to have a recap of like a 30-90 roadmap. One of the things you'll definitely see on there is MFA for all admins, MFA for all users. Try to tie together with some conditional access so you're not bombarding your end users with multi-factor every time. Every 2 hours, they have to go check their phone. It probably won't be a successful rollout. Try to look at some advanced endpoint protection and response. Take that anti-malware a step further for a lot of the advanced detections. And then just, if possible, look at some integrations across. So as you saw, maybe the endpoint didn't identify anything malicious going on it, but since a malicious email came in, we can kick off that detection and automatically provide that scan across the environment. The final one's going to be personal devices. Does everybody, or do a lot of people use like BYOD for bring your own device, allow your employees to enroll their own devices? Quite common these days. I see a lot of customers getting away from that corporate owned. A lot of times then you have 2 phones, just giving them a stipend or something. Personal devices for data exfiltration, a lot of well-known attacks. Personal email and devices. I don't see it very common in some certain industries, but do you guys allow access to like Gmail accounts, personal email accounts? Is that a no over here?
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, that's good. But we see a lot of customers still allowing that and not restricting that. So having the ability to go ahead, remote access, abnormal and excessive login times. It goes without saying that.
Sorry, do you put like an MDM on their personal phone in that situation?
So we see some do MDM enrollment on a personal phone depending on the requirements.
Okay.
Yep, with our solution, we actually have what's called mobile application management, where you don't even have to do the full MDM enrollment.
Okay.
Since I think I saw everybody's hand go up for Office 365, what you would be able to do is allow access to a lot of the corporate applications that have access to your data. So email, the SharePoint app, OneDrive app, Teams app, all of our apps. third-party apps can be wrapped as well. And what that does is it provides that authentication when going into Word, for example. It'll provide that authentication. It'll hit your Intune and will identify, hey, there's a MAM policy for this application. We're going to then provide that encryption, that data leakage protection right on that app. A lot of the BYOD scenarios really like this a lot better than having that full MDM enrollment with the device message that is really scarier sounding than it really is. That, hey, can corporate see everything on my device? No, but a lot of users will think. So this just provides it. And the most important thing is, from a corporate standpoint, you can go ahead and pull that data, pull those apps off when you need, and not go ahead and have to remove any personal pictures on there, their personal data, and prevent that data leakage in between.
It works really well.
You guys use that?
Yeah, we have work profiles, so we can wipe the phone, and it actually even maintains a separation between local phone storage and anything in the work profile. So it causes issues from time to time where you can't access a certain thing, but it works very well.
So as he said, no issues whatsoever. Yeah, so there are definitely some scenarios that when you're looking at your MAM policies to provide that data barrier, data leakage control, where you can go ahead and customize now some other apps I want to go ahead and provide data transfer to and some others can't. Personal data on that device probably is not going to be something you want, but could cause issues in some scenarios for sure. Also on Windows 10, a lot of people don't know, but a lot of that same capability is available on Windows 10 with Windows Information Protection. So you can actually identify a user accesses a file stored on the file server. We're going to go ahead and identify that as corporate, and then you have your controls on, hey, this can only be used in other corporate identified applications. Somebody tries to take that data, put it in a attachment in a personal Gmail account, will automatically block that from being attached or pasted, even the content of that document pasted in there, as well as gives you the ability to pull that corporate data off a machine. Probably less common, but are any of you guys doing BYOD from a desktop or a laptop standpoint, where you just allow your users or employees to go out, pay for a desktop or a laptop in a certain, no? So we see that more and more common as like the modern management, autopilot gets more popularity, getting away from the imaging. This is a way we see that you can provide that additional security. So even if a user is outside the organization, you can wipe that corporate data off the device from that BYOD scenario. But additional discovery, so you can see from a personal email standpoint, what users are going to and how much data they're sending up, when they're going, and provide those policies around. Say, hey, maybe I'm still going to allow access to these personal emails, but I want to see everything and where they're going. You can block risky, unsanctioned apps, other third-party cloud providers that maybe aren't one of the bigger, more secured solutions. But really having the ability to detect that abnormal behavior and some of the malicious attacks. So being able to do, like, even within your on-prem Active Directory, stuff like reconnaissance and the cyber kill chain, if somebody gets on the network, compromises the machine, they probably don't know where they're going. They probably know nothing about your environment. First thing they're going to do is spend their time mapping out where your domain controllers are, your database servers are, your file servers, map out how they're going to move as part of that attack. You can actually go ahead and identify really early on, hey, somebody's querying all of my Active Directory groups to see who's got membership in finance or, of course, domain admins, and get really early to Dave typically logs into these two machines, these given weeks from these locations. Now Dave's user account is logged into these 9 machines at hours that he typically doesn't work. I'm going to go ahead and give you that really early detection. So even if it's a really advanced attack and they know how to invade a lot of intrusion detection, you can still say, hey, this is abnormal for how your company works, and get that really early detection. You can see here, Peter, a lot of the logins and stuff, who he typically logs into, resources he accesses. So in this scenario where Peter's just a senior programmer, doesn't have access, for example, to corporate financial file servers. Now, if Peter tries logging into those financial servers and accessing data, you'll get an early detection saying, hey, this is an abnormal potential identity theft scenario. Go ahead and take a look, because Peter doesn't typically do that. Stuff like reconnaissance, as I mentioned, querying out your map. The key takeaways here, protect your applications, devices, of course. Again, enterprise detection response. Go beyond the typical anti-malware, the firewalls, the stuff, the protection capabilities that have been around for so long, and try to get more in that respond in that detection advanced scenario. Identify shadow IT, and then quickly identify those anomalies. One thing that Target did have is with their intrusion detection, they did flag some alarms when that vendor account was moving around, but it got caught up in the noise because they were able to go ahead and make it look enough like it was legitimate work. Having some of these advanced ones, but also being diligent and proactive looking at those logs again, because some of the times out there are anywhere from 90 days to almost a year that many times an attacker can be on your network without being detected. So if you can imagine being on there for an entire year, that's an eternity to go ahead and get whatever data they want while they're in there. So where to start? So does everybody know what Office 365 Secure Score is? So a little bit. So this is our security posture and recommendations tool. Everybody that has Office 365 has access to this. What it provides is the ability to see, hey, out of a possible 200 points or 500 in specific areas, you guys score that level, and this is why. We'll break down what constitutes that score, as well as you can see here, enable MFA for privileged roles. You enable that, you immediately get 50 points, so you can actually see how you've trended over a period of time. Have less global admins, use non-global administrative roles, so don't do your normal user account, also have admin roles. The one that does all the web surfing, all the email, don't have them also be able to go have admin rights. It's AD as well as cloud best practices. And go ahead and map out how you can go ahead and trend over a period of time. So you can actually, a lot of customers will go ahead and work on this checklist of items and show their management team, say, hey, we've trended our security posture over a period of time, and this is what we've done, and this is where we're going to help map that out. From our security roadmap recommendations, a little bit more detailed on top priorities. So you can see some identity protection stuff. From a threat standpoint, really try to get additional visibility in where your users are going on the cloud, what they're doing. You can see there, enforce multi-factor for admin accounts. That's going to be, if you go into Secure Score, that'll be #1 for sure within the recommendations. If an attacker can compromise a low-level account, not good, but they don't really have access to a whole lot. If they can elevate that access and get an admin account, they can pretty much get whatever they want eventually. So really make sure those are properly secured. Information protection, it's not as easy to just say, hey, go start your data classification, start classifying all of your content, determine what that classification scheme is. But start thinking about that, because as you saw in that first case study, if you can have all of your sensitive data classified, protected, it's going to really reduce the exposure you have if some of that data leakage were to happen in some of those scenarios. And then obviously recommend checking out securescore.office.com, because it'll help you on that checklist of items to go ahead and look at going forward. 90 days out, it's more the enforce MFA for all users. So real quick, are there a lot of customers using the enterprise mobility security solution here? Okay. One thing, and some of this is to look at some of those conditional access policies. If you don't have it rolled out yet, MFA for all users, highly recommended. Get that. Maybe not for all apps all the time. Your sensitive apps, sensitive data. The really nice thing is even third-party cloud apps leveraging Azure AD for authentication, you can provide those same conditional access controls. So if you guys use a Salesforce, a ServiceNow, Concur, Box, you can go ahead and leverage that authentication and provide and say, hey, from domain join, require MFA, block based on risk. go ahead and then start looking at rolling out some of your data loss prevention policies with data classification. And then finally, refining your policies, getting really granular on those authentication scenarios, secure privileged access workstations. So you guys familiar with privileged access workstations? So one of the big recommendations Microsoft has is not leveraging the same machine that you use for normal day-to-day or that your admin accounts log into, because as we talked about earlier, it's really, really easy to dump the Kerberos ticket or password hash to use a secured machine that doesn't have access to the internet, that can access only certain things. Maybe it's scoped to just Office 365. Nobody else can come in and have access. And then nobody's going to be able to go ahead and install a tool or dump tickets or security information on those machines. And to kind of move down there, so when you're doing admin, do just-in-time administration on a secure privileged access workstation. And then all of these, and I think you have the slides that follow up. There's a link to where all of this guidance is, and some of this has stuff that goes through that in more detail. Stuff to definitely consider. And then also highly recommend here at the Red Level events, engaging with Red Level for their security assessment offering. So a lot of this stuff you'll actually see does the 30, 90, 180 security gap analysis, where you're at today, what's the recommendation, as well as creating some of these policies and getting started on, hey, we heard conditional access is important. We know MFA, since it prevents 99.9% of actual known attacks, are really important. And have that, hey, how do we get started? Work with Red Level to go ahead and map out the security roadmap for you guys. Were there any questions?
As somebody who works for security at Microsoft, what are your thoughts on password change, time, 90 days for users to change their passwords? I believe it's best practice, but I've been hearing a lot that changing your password every 90 days may not be the best way to go if you're using the other things like MFA.
Yep, so if you're using the other things like MFA, even NIST recently released their guidance is no longer require those quicker, more frequent password changes, because then users typically will try to end up reusing passwords and you're losing some of that security anyways. But if you have the MFA, some of the risk-based stuff, I think their guidance is now a year or more unless needed. So if you identified some of those high-risk scenarios or something, then force them to do a password change. But otherwise, they're probably reusing their passwords. They're probably writing down their passwords. They're probably not happy with you in the first place. So the guidance is, if you have those other protections, you can push it out further. Still have a longer passphrase rather than complex. Hey, we got 4 periods, an exclamation point, and 2 letters.
Complexities and the MFA, and doing all of that, and then so we have like 13 characters, all the jazz in there with the MFA, and then every 60 days they have to change the password, and people are reusing them, and then you run into the whole you can't use it. It just becomes it's a lot more trying to just keep up with people. You got to reach out to people. It's not changing password.
Yep.
So
I'd recommend keeping the longer password length and pushing out the time to change that password.
And back to the earlier conversation, Eric, I mean, that's again a marketing point. So if you're introducing MFA and you're worried about adoption, that's one way to say, okay, now you don't have to change your password as often. So again, it's a marketing tactic in how we get these technologies out to our users.
And I don't know if Eric talked about it, you just go passwordless using some of the new capabilities. That is the real way. Yeah. So let's go to a world where we don't have passwords anymore. So that's now a reality.
What is on the endpoints seeing the Windows Defender Security Center? Is that agent-based as far as what it's using to collect some of that information about the endpoints? What's the endpoint?
Yep, so that's actually the very nice thing about our solution is all of you that are running Windows 10 right now have the sensor already in Windows 10. So it's just onboarding that sensor into the Defender Security Center, and it'll start reporting that telemetry.
Enterprise?
That's part of Windows 10 Enterprise E5.